To have with us Steve Curnutte, who is a parent of 3 boys who are going through MBA in the classes of 2017, 2021, 2024 respectively. Mr. Curnutte has recently returned from a trip to Poland and Ukraine and has been involved in fundraising efforts to help those affected by the war that's currently going on in Ukraine. He's now going to speak to us, share his experiences from the visit, and let us know how those fundraising efforts are going and how we can help. So with that, please welcome Steve Curnutte.
Thank you, guys. Some of you I know because having had the boys here, I've met some of you guys, and I'm honored to be here to talk about this topic. That picture I took while he was being interviewed by a New York Times reporter last week that we snuck into this secret compound in Lviv, Ukraine. Before the war, he was a race car driver, a professional racing drone pilot, and now that he's between the ages of 18 and 60, he can't leave Ukraine and he's fighting. His face is concealed because he and the other 200 pilots in this group are targeted by the Russians all the time. I got back from Ukraine about 8-9 days ago, and I'm going to try to go back and backfill that story for you and tell you why I went and what I'm doing now that I'm back. This next picture was about 3 hours after my friend dropped me off. I hadn't even made it back to Warsaw yet. He dropped me at the Ukrainian border, and on the way back from Lviv to Kyiv, a military truck passed him on the shoulder and hit a landmine. That's his car. He texted me on Telegram and let me know that his ears were ringing and the car was hit with shrapnel, but he was okay. The next picture is of the tank, or the military transport vehicle itself. When you hear that somebody hits a landmine, know that it's a big deal. The driver died, and the next slide, one more. This woman was almost 100 yards away from the incident. She collapsed from shock right after this picture was taken. The next photo are of some of the troops. That was their thank you photo to me. They're holding some of the drones that I took them. And the next photo has 3 more folks in it. The woman on the left had been recently trained by some of the professional pilots to fly these drones. The next slide is of a new friend of mine named Dima that I met, and that's his home. It was his home. One of his family members died when a Russian cluster bomb hit right next to that. And the next slide, and the final one here, you guys might remember that there were 7 missiles that hit Lviv. You know, Lviv is in the in the west of Ukraine, and there's not a lot of tanks and military activity there, but the 7 missiles hit train stations and airport facilities, and it missed a train station depot and hit this tire store. Look at the damage caused. There used to be a building right in the middle. So there's a 2-minute video. While we were in Ukraine, my friend and I that I went with, and I'll tell you the story in a moment, we were calling back home asking Nashville companies to volunteer their time. So a web developer built a website for us. Some lawyers helped us set up a not-for-profit. These folks that do video editing helped us create this presentation. We started calling friends of ours in the Nashville community, and before we'd even left to come back home from Poland, we'd raised $200,000. And as of this morning, we've raised a little over $300,000 to buy more drones. Again, I'll tell that story in a moment, but if you wouldn't mind playing the video, it's 2 minutes long. Please do what you can to read the captions because it tries to explain a bit about where I went and why I went. Thanks. All these photos and videos were ones that I took on the trip. That's crossing the border. It's a 3-mile line of cars. That's the drones we took. 12 of them we snuck in. There were 3 of us. One of us flew through London. One flew through Paris. I flew through Frankfurt, Germany, so that we could get them into Ukraine. It's one of the pilots we trained, or my new friends trained, sorry. I took pictures of them working on modifying the drone frames. DronesForGoodWorldwide.org is the website if there are people in your lives that want to donate to help us buy some drones. So now let me back up and tell you what happened. The first guy in the photograph was wearing goggles. They were FPV goggles to operate drones. It takes like 3 to 5 years to be really proficient. I mean, flying a drone is simple. You can do it in 10 seconds. But flying these very, very powerful drones and fast drones that go 70, 80 miles an hour is difficult with these goggles. So this is how it started. There's a company that's publicly traded called Red Cat Holdings. It's based down in Puerto Rico. My friend is on the board. I'm an investor. And Red Cat Holdings owns Fat Shark. Makes those goggles. They're used by militaries all around the world. They're state-of-the-art. Red Cat also owns Teal drones, which have a civilian and a military version. But they also have a company where they do promotional videos in the drone industry. And for that, they entered Ukraine with the permission of the Ukrainian government many years ago to go film Chernobyl. They used drones to film all the empty buildings, the trees growing up through the streets and buildings, the animals wandering the streets. You can find the video on YouTube. It's really cool. Anyway, through that process, some of the people at this company met these drone pilots in the Ukraine. So naturally, when the invasion started, they called and said, "How are you doing?" And the answer was not very good. 70% of all the hobby drones in the world are made by a company called DJI. DJI, I have one, it's called the Phantom. They're made by a Chinese company, and what no one knew was that the Chinese put a kill switch in the software that anytime one of those drones is turned on, they can ground it anywhere in the world they want. Well, the Ukrainians, these civilian pilots, were trying to help the troops, trying to help evacuation routes. In fact, at the time, they were trying to help buses that were getting senior citizens out of a nursing home through the Carpathian Mountains down into Hungary. And all of a sudden, the drones were grounded. The drones were grounded because the Chinese software and the Russians had worked together. Well, they hacked the software, they got them flying again, and then one day later, another terrible thing was learned, and that is that the code that communicates from the base to the drone is not encrypted. The location of the drone pilot started being shared with the Russians, and there's another video we put on YouTube of one of the pilots landing his DJI drone, and moments later, a missile comes in to strike it. Several folks died before they figured that out, and now comes the need for American-made drones with encrypted software signaling. So that's why we went. We helped them extend their shortage. They had an 8-day supply of parts, servos, propellers, batteries, so we took extra drones to them to help, and now we're trying to raise money to buy more drones. While we were there, we found warehouses, supply chains, logistics, to try to figure out how we don't have to hand deliver these things in the future. So what are they doing quickly? Humanitarian efforts. You might have read last week about the mass grave of 900 bodies they found. That was this group of 200 pilots who helped find that mass grave. They're also trying to document war crimes so those who've committed atrocities can be prosecuted after the war. They are also 3D mapping historic structures. You might know that when Notre Dame burned, no one ever thought it had been 3D mapped, but it turns out the video game Assassin's Creed had spent 10,000 hours mapping the cathedral, and they're using that 3D map to help rebuild it. So they're trying to 3D map their own Eastern Orthodox churches and other historic buildings in Ukraine so they can be rebuilt. They're also trying to fly to find evacuation routes for refugees, like I mentioned. But there's also a military side to what they're doing. You may remember at the beginning of the invasion, there was a 40-mile convoy. You guys remember 40 miles of tanks and trucks, the Russians coming into Ukraine. Well, this group of civilian pilots helped identify the front and the back and used artillery standing next to their Ukrainian counterparts, saying 20 yards to the left, 20 yards to the right. They've also taken over in the secret compound where I was, CNC machines and 3D printers, and they're modifying the drone frames to carry ordnances that they can drop onto tanks as they approach civilian areas. I just want to finish, because I know this is a short time and you guys want to move on, by telling you kind of why I went, in addition to the fact that I was lucky enough to have an opportunity to help, and not everybody does. This war bothers me. The invasion bothers me. I don't like bullies. I don't like anyone who picks on someone they think is weaker or is perceived to be weaker. I think it's usually because the bully has their own insecurities. I think there's a perversity in the pleasure a bully takes in hurting, and I don't like it. I think Putin is a bully. I think he's a butcher. And I think he's playing a game of chicken with the world, and the stakes are high. I mean, I have 3 sons, and you guys know Kellen. And I would not want them to abide a bully, and I wouldn't want them to know that when I had a chance to do something about it, I didn't. I met people whose family members had died. I saw a 5-year-old kid at the border who'd been wandering for 2 days. I helped him get a cup of hot chocolate and some food. When they find a mass grave, and one of the pilots sends me a message 2 days ago and says that he's afraid one of his family members is in it, it's very real. And during the 26 hours when I was in Lviv, I was in a hotel, and they said over the loudspeaker to get to the bomb shelter because a Russian bomber had entered Ukrainian airspace. It all is very real. I think that what the world's facing in this invasion could potentially be an existential threat to global security, or we can stop it. So anyway, I'm meeting with some senators next week, hoping to get some government dollars. And I'll end by saying, please pay attention to the news and to the war. Please know what's going on. There are a lot of people that are suffering over there. And the one thing about this war is the Ukrainians aren't asking anyone to fight the war for them. They're willing to fight themselves. They just need help, humanitarian and otherwise. So thank you guys for honoring me and allowing me to come speak to you. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.